CEO, and I'm gonna play another clip and then go back to his personality type in my view, coming from these clips and obviously his man. All right, so that was another interesting clip with Travis in one of his most watched interviews. And as you can see, he is continuously challenging the status quo. He's almost defiant with the status quo, believes he can improve things dramatically, and he's not shy about it. Has this confrontational way about his confronting his own view of the world with the current rules, and you can sense that in the way he speaks. You can see it in what he says and how he challenges every question. And given all of this, and given my know-how and my background in enneagram, and I'm by no means a professional of enneagram, but I've studied it for years. I'm very interested in personality types in general. I believe that Travis is a type 8, the challenger. We're not going to have time to get into personality types farther than that. I recommend that you do your own reading on personality types, but it's clear that number 8s are a lot of what we just looked at. Self-confident, assertive, unapologetic. They basically are willing to risk a lot personally and for the company in this case to change how things are and turn the world more into their worldview. A very famous sort of more positive number 8 is Martin Luther King, and one more negative will be Pablo Escobar. So whether you like Travis or the other two guys I mentioned, obviously they're in the extremes, but they have things in common, and we're not here to judge whether somebody's good or bad, but just try to understand what their personality is like. And in my view, Travis at that time thought that he needed to challenge a lot of the rules and cut corners, and that he needed to force the change of legislation, change of laws, and that he wasn't going to get there by following every rule written. He had to basically defy the laws, establish rules, and impose his new reality and view of the world. So now let's turn the attention over to the current CEO, Dara Khosrowshahi. I think I'm saying it right. So Dara has been the CEO of Uber since 2017, and it's got a very different type of personality. And obviously, if you guys know a little bit about this story, the board of Uber thought that they needed a radical change of direction. And in my view, the personality of the CEO is the personality of the company in some ways. And so, for better or worse, Travis had such an infectious personality that it was particularly true in his management. Uber became Travis, and Travis became Uber. And at some point, the board decided that's no bueno moving forward. We need to change directions, and went for Dara, who was the CEO of Expedia at that time. So let's watch a couple of short clips of Dara and get a little bit in his personality type.
Sitting outside of the New York Stock Exchange, I said to you, when are you going to reach profitability? This was the question. And here we are sitting together now, and who would have thought it would have happened in the midst of what is still, to some degree, an ongoing pandemic?
Yeah, it's amazing how the world changes, but I think the really great thing about Uber is the flexibility of the model. And actually, here we are, still in somewhat of a pandemic, and our gross bookings levels are 35 to 40% above the IPO. And we are very clearly on the path to profitability. So super proud of the team for what they've accomplished, but we got a lot of work ahead of us.
But explain what's happened here, because obviously this is ahead of plan, or at least ahead of plan after plan.
Yes.
Given what's happened in the world.
Well, what we did was early on, we identified our need to bring on
Dara and Sid to take the enneagram for me, because what better way to get to the bottom of Dara than to find out what his enneagram is?
Sid is my wife, and by the way, if you want to come sit up here for me, please feel free.
So Dara took it, grateful. He said he tilted toward a 9 and a 3. So a type 9 in the enneagram is the peacemaker. Easygoing, consensus building, agreeable, but maybe avoids conflict.
Yeah.
And maybe a little bit complacent. So that reads a little bit like your Glassdoor review that I checked out. Okay, type 3 is the achiever. Success-oriented, pragmatic, driven, and maybe a little image conscious. Okay? Every number on the Enneagram has their superpowers and their kryptonite, right? So as you hear that played back to you, as you become more self-aware in life, what parts of you are your superpowers in business, and what are the parts of you that you've learned sneak up on you and can be your undoing?
Sure. When I reflect on that and kind of, I think that I have the hypothesis that you basically are who you are once you're 7 years old and you don't change, right? It's kind of this core. And I think some of where I came from is I was the youngest brother. I was the youngest of 3. We had family all around. And you kind of got along with the family or you got the heck out. And so for us, like growing up in Iran, we always...
All right, so interesting clips. As you can see, I cheated a little bit there because I had seen this video that piqued my interest and actually inspired me to make the clip about Dara's and Travis' personality types, which is this interview where he reveals he is either a 3 or a 9. Now, in my view and my study of the enneagram, you cannot be 2 numbers at the same time. So they didn't get specific in that interview, but while they mention number 3 and number 9, the number 3 and number 9 are very different. And I believe that Dara proves to be disciplined. He's been performing every quarter and has been relentless even throughout the pandemic. If you look at his career, I believe he was a CEO by his earlier mid-30s of Expedia, of a multi-billion-dollar company. So definitely an overachiever. You can see that he's got an agreeable personality, definitely in contrast with Travis. He's more concerned with principles. I mean, he's been very vocal about how the culture went wrong before he took on board. That's actually one of the reasons why the board chose him, of how willing he was to take on the negative of the culture and change the perception of Uber and really change the core of Uber. So I would say he's concerned with principles. I would say he's also concerned with image conscious to some extent, probably for good reason in terms of Uber. So that type of personality fits in really well with number 3, the achiever. So once again, I recommend that you do your own research here. If you're interested in the Enneagram, I think it's a fascinating way to understand your personality and your inner fears and your desires. But to finish this video, I just wanted to quickly comment on both Travis and Dara and how they contrast with each other. They have obviously very different types of personalities, and whether I think Travis would have been the right CEO for this stage. And in my view, I think, as I said, I'm not here to judge a person's morality or whether they're good or bad. I think, everybody is flawed and good in their own ways. And so I think Travis was extremely defiant, as I mentioned before, and also extremely determined, which were key elements of his management. And probably because so many rules were broken along the way, a different type of CEO, kind of like Dara in the early stage, wouldn't have worked out. This is just my personal opinion. It would have just taken too long to change the status quo without breaking things a little bit. I'm not justifying it. I just think it would have been a different story. And having said that, as a public company, and given the pressure there is from social media and sort of the general uh, culture of uh, how companies must behave, that has changed a lot over the last 10 or 15 years with social media, with people being more conscious. I mean, you see all the issues that Facebook has had for having the wrong culture in the perception of the user, and how much they've suffered, not just the stock price, but eventually the usage of it. Uber seemed like it needed a change of perception and a change of core principles, or it was going to hit a wall in terms of user consumer perception and ultimately usage, probably. And so I believe Dara is taking the company in the right direction. It has probably slowed down in some ways, but it's not in jeopardy as it used to be a few years ago, with this huge problem of perception and probably to some degree toxic culture. At least that's how it was determined by many people. So I think Dara has this type 3 personality that is fantastic for a public company that just needs to perform and perform, and also has so many stakeholders, the earners, as they call it, the drivers, the customers, investors. It's hard to have a combative attitude like Travis does and get so many people to agree. Also, they are highly dependent on legislation and these different stakeholders sort of coming to the table. So, in contrast, I'll finish with this comment with Airbnb. Has had a much more agreeable CEO founder than Travis, and as a result, I think that they've been able to manage some of these sticky situations better, staying out of the headlines a little more than Uber. Now, are we paying the price as stock investors of having a more balanced CEO? I don't think so. I honestly think that the price is going to come around, and that maybe with a more wild, if you will, type of management, we would have hit a wall at this point. Just the pressure is too strong coming from different stakeholders, and it's very hard to fly under the radar if you're doing things that are considered by most people either immoral or illegal. So with all that, I think Dara has the right type of personality. I think it might take a little longer for the stock price to come around, but I think with this relentless type of management and this overachiever as a CEO, we're gonna get quarter after quarter of profitable results of growing gross bookings, and he's going to be able to get a lot of people to come to the table like he has with taxi drivers, with lawmakers, consumers, earners, etc. And the media is clearly changed its perception of Uber. Is in the headlines for the right reasons, which I think is very important as a public company. All right. Well, I really hope you enjoyed this video. It was really fun for me to build it. It took a little bit of time, but I enjoyed understanding the types of personality. And I do think it's a key factor for the success of the company with the type of personality of the CEO, and obviously their determination to make the company succeed. And hope you found it valuable. And if you haven't done so, please share a like, share a comment, and subscribe to the channel. Thank you.